While the world is still arguing about artificial intelligence, Burkina Faso is quietly asking a different question. Not whether AI will change the future, but whether it can save lives today. In the Sahel, the battlefield is not always visible. Sometimes the greatest danger is hidden under dust, buried beneath a road, waiting for a military convoy, a supply truck, or a young soldier who may never see it coming. Mines and improvised explosive devices have become one of the cruelest weapons used by terrorist groups because they do not need courage, they do not need a face, and they do not need to win a battle. They only need one hidden explosion to create fear. But inside Burkina Faso, a new answer is beginning to appear. Young engineers, working with the needs of the army in mind, have started building smart defense systems using robots, sensors, and artificial intelligence. These are not just gadgets. They are tools designed to protect human lives before danger reaches the soldier. And if you care about stories of African innovation, stay with this channel, because what is happening in Burkina Faso may be one of the most important signs of a new Africa rising. This is not only the story of one mine-detecting robot, it is the story of a country trying to build its own defense technology ecosystem. It is about engineers who refuse to wait for foreign solutions. It is about a government that sees technology as a path toward sovereignty. And it raises a powerful question. Could this be the beginning of a military revolution truly made in Africa? Burkina Faso did not arrive at this point overnight. The robot attracting attention today is the result of a much larger problem that has shaped military operations across the Sahel for years. Unlike conventional warfare, many attacks begin long before soldiers ever see an enemy. Hidden explosive devices are buried beneath roads, concealed along supply routes, or placed near strategic positions. A single mine can stop an entire convoy, destroy expensive equipment, and, most importantly, cost human lives within seconds. Traditional mine detectors have helped reduce these risks, but they also come with important limitations. Many require operators to move dangerously close to suspicious objects. Most rely primarily on metal detection, making it difficult to distinguish between actual threats and harmless metallic debris scattered across the terrain. That challenge inspired a group of Burkinabe engineers to think differently. Instead of creating another conventional detector, they designed a remotely operated robotic platform capable of staying approximately 100 meters away from its operator. Equipped with metal sensors, gas sensors, and artificial intelligence-assisted analysis, the system combines multiple sources of information before warning the operator about a possible explosive threat. When a suspicious object is identified, the robot can send an alert, activate an audible warning, and even mark the location with paint, allowing military personnel to evaluate the situation from a safer distance. The long-term vision goes even further, including the possibility of integrating neutralization capabilities into future versions. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect is not that this robot uses artificial intelligence. Countries around the world are already exploring AI for military applications. What makes this project remarkable is that Burkinabe engineers chose to solve one of their country's most urgent security challenges with technology they are developing themselves. Rather than waiting for expensive foreign solutions, they began building a system tailored to their own battlefield conditions. That shift in mindset may prove to be even more important than the robot itself. If this robot were the only technological achievement emerging from Burkina Faso, it would already deserve attention. But the bigger story is not about one invention. It is about a country gradually building its own defense technology ecosystem. An ecosystem is much more than a single product. It connects engineers, universities, researchers, software developers, manufacturers, and the military around one common goal, creating solutions designed for Burkina Faso's own security challenges. The mine detection robot is only one part of that vision. Alongside it, discussions have expanded to locally developed drones, armored vehicles, intelligent monitoring systems, communication software, and advanced sensor technologies. Although many of these initiatives remain under development, together they reflect a clear strategic direction. This changes the conversation completely. Instead of asking whether Burkina Faso can build one successful machine, the more important question becomes whether it can continuously design, improve, and maintain its own defense technologies. That distinction matters because imported equipment solves immediate problems, while local expertise creates long-term resilience. Engineers can adapt systems to changing battlefield conditions, improve software, repair equipment without depending entirely on foreign suppliers, and gradually strengthen national technical knowledge. Building this kind of ecosystem also encourages cooperation. Universities educate future engineers. Researchers develop new ideas. Private companies manufacture components. The military contributes operational experience and practical feedback. Together, they create a cycle of innovation that becomes stronger with every project. No modern defense industry was created overnight. Every successful nation began with prototypes, testing, setbacks, and constant improvement. Burkina Faso now appears to be taking those first important steps. Whether these efforts eventually grow into large-scale production remains uncertain, but the determination to build technological capability at home may become the country's greatest strategic achievement. Behind many of Burkina Faso's recent technology projects is a broader vision that extends beyond engineering. It is a vision that places science, innovation, and self-reliance at the center of national development. President Ibrahim Traore has repeatedly argued that lasting independence cannot rely solely on political sovereignty. A nation must also strengthen its ability to produce, innovate, and solve its own problems. Within that vision, technology is no longer viewed as a luxury reserved for wealthy countries. Instead, it becomes a strategic tool for protecting lives, strengthening national security, and reducing long-term dependence on foreign suppliers. This perspective helps explain why locally developed defense projects have received growing public attention. Rather than encouraging young people to wait for opportunities abroad, the message increasingly emphasizes building solutions at home. Engineers, researchers, and university graduates are encouraged to apply their knowledge to challenges facing Burkina Faso, whether in defense, agriculture, healthcare, or digital technology. The mine detection robot reflects this philosophy. It demonstrates how local talent can respond directly to local security needs instead of relying entirely on imported equipment designed for different environments. While no single invention can transform a nation's defense capabilities overnight, every successful prototype contributes valuable experience, technical expertise, and confidence for future projects. This approach also carries an important economic benefit. Investing in engineers creates knowledge that remains inside the country. Every design, every software improvement, and every field test strengthens domestic expertise that can support future innovations across multiple industries. Of course, technology alone cannot solve every security challenge. Effective institutions, sustainable investment, and continuous research remain essential. However, by encouraging innovation and supporting local technical talent, Burkina Faso is attempting to build something more durable than a single military project. It is investing in the human capacity needed to create the next generation of African solutions. For many observers, that may become Ibrahim Traore's most enduring contribution, not simply promoting new technologies, but helping inspire a culture where solving national problems through science and innovation becomes part of the country's long-term identity. As Burkina Faso continues investing in locally developed defense technologies, international reactions have become increasingly divided. Supporters view these efforts as evidence that African nations are beginning to build the technical capacity needed to address their own security challenges. Critics, however, remain cautious. One common argument is that Burkina Faso lacks the financial resources to sustain an advanced defense industry. Others question whether locally developed systems have undergone enough operational testing to prove their effectiveness under real battlefield conditions. Some analysts also point out that modern defense technology often depends on imported electronic components, making complete technological independence difficult to achieve. These concerns deserve serious consideration. Building reliable military technology requires years of testing, continuous investment, and rigorous evaluation. No responsible observer should assume that a promising prototype automatically becomes a fully operational military system. At the same time, history shows that every successful defense industry began with modest experiments. Today's global defense manufacturers were once small engineering teams developing their first prototypes. They improved through repeated testing, practical experience, and long-term commitment rather than instant perfection. For Burkina Faso, the most significant achievement may not be claiming to possess the world's most advanced technology. Instead, it is demonstrating the determination to solve national security problems with domestic knowledge whenever possible. Even if certain components continue to come from international suppliers, designing, integrating, maintaining, and improving complete systems within the country represents an important step toward greater technological independence. Ultimately, the debate should not focus solely on whether Burkina Faso has already reached the level of established military powers. The more meaningful question is whether it has begun building the scientific foundation that could support future innovation. If that process continues, today's prototype may one day be remembered not as the final destination, but as the first milestone in a much larger journey toward African technological self-reliance. The lessons emerging from Burkina Faso extend far beyond military technology. They speak to a broader question facing many African nations today: how can countries strengthen their future without waiting for others to build it for them? The first lesson is that innovation begins with solving real problems. Burkina Faso did not start by trying to compete with the world's largest defense industries. It started by addressing one of its own most urgent challenges: protecting soldiers from hidden explosive devices. That practical approach gives research a clear purpose and creates technologies that respond directly to local needs. The second lesson is that investing in people is often more valuable than investing only in imported equipment. A modern machine can be purchased, but the knowledge required to improve, repair, and redesign that machine must be developed at home. Every engineer trained, every researcher supported, and every student encouraged to pursue science strengthens the country's long-term capacity for innovation. The third lesson is the importance of collaboration. Governments establish priorities. Universities educate future specialists. Research institutions generate new ideas. Private companies manufacture products. And the military provides operational experience. When these sectors work together, innovation becomes sustainable rather than accidental. This model also has applications far beyond national defense. The same expertise used to develop sensors, robotics, artificial intelligence, and communication systems can contribute to agriculture, healthcare, transportation, disaster response, and environmental monitoring. A country's investment in technology rarely benefits only one sector. Perhaps that is the most important message of all. Burkina Faso is not simply attempting to build smarter defense equipment. It is trying to cultivate a generation of innovators capable of solving African problems with African solutions. If more nations across the continent choose to follow a similar path, the future of Africa may be shaped less by imported technology and more by the creativity, determination, and talent of its own people. As this story comes to an end, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The conversation was never really about a robot. It was about a mindset. For decades, many people assumed that Africa's future would always depend on technologies designed somewhere else. Yet, Burkina Faso is attempting to challenge that assumption by encouraging its own engineers, researchers, and young innovators to create solutions for the problems they understand best. The road ahead will not be easy. Developing advanced defense technologies requires funding, research, testing, and years of continuous improvement. There will be setbacks, criticism, and difficult lessons, but every nation that now leads in science and technology once faced those same obstacles. Perhaps the most important achievement is not the machine itself, but the confidence it inspires. It reminds young Africans that innovation is not limited by geography. Great ideas can emerge wherever people are willing to learn, experiment, and persevere. So, what do you think? Could Burkina Faso become a model for other African nations seeking greater technological independence? Share your thoughts in the comments because your perspective is part of this important conversation. And if you enjoy exploring stories about innovation, leadership, and Africa's transformation, subscribe to the channel and join us for the next journey. Whether you call it Pan-African progress, the vision of Captain Ibrahim Traore, the spirit of Pan-Africanism, or simply the determination of ordinary people, one message remains clear. Burkina Faso is demonstrating that Africa New is not only a slogan, with leaders like Ibrahim Traore encouraging self-reliance, cooperation through the African Union, and confidence in local talent. The dream of building solutions truly made in Africa is becoming increasingly real. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video. What if one of the most important defense stories in Africa today is not coming from a giant military factory in Europe, America, or Asia, but from young engineers in Burkina Faso working with solar panels, cameras, and artificial intelligence? For years, Burkina Faso was seen as a country forced to depend on imported equipment, foreign suppliers, and outside promises. When danger appeared near a village, a military post, or a border road, the country often had to rely on tools designed somewhere else, priced somewhere else, and controlled by someone else. But now, something different is happening. Under Captain Ibrahim Traore, Burkina Faso is beginning to ask a powerful question. Why should a nation wait for others to protect it, when its own sons and daughters can build the tools of protection themselves? That question is at the heart of this new surveillance system. It is not just about watching from a distance. It is about changing the mind of a nation. It is about telling young Burkinabe engineers that their knowledge matters. It is about telling Africa that security can no longer be separated from technology, dignity, and sovereignty. Don't forget to share your thoughts and let us know where you're from. Every comment you leave helps amplify Africa's voice across the globe. Behind this shift stands a system known as NIM, a locally developed surveillance device created for security and defense needs. According to the description given by its developers, NIM can be installed near military sites, sensitive facilities, or barracks to watch an area day and night. What makes this system important is not only that it can observe, it is that it can think, detect, and follow. With cameras and artificial intelligence, it can recognize people, vehicles, and even flying objects. In a country facing serious security challenges, That kind of early warning can make a real difference. The system is also designed to work with solar panels. This matters greatly in remote areas, where electricity may be limited or unreliable. A surveillance tool that depends only on the power grid can fail at the worst moment. But a solar-powered system gives Burkina Faso a chance to protect key locations with greater independence. The current model has been described as capable of observing about 1 kilometer with its installed cameras. The developers also explained that stronger cameras could extend the range to several kilometers, depending on the need. Some reports and discussions speak of ambitions reaching much farther distances. But the most important point is clear. Burkina Faso is learning how to expand its own eyes across difficult terrain. The device can also be mounted on a mast rising about 18 meters, giving security forces a wider view of the surrounding area. For older viewers who have watched Africa depend on outside powers for too long, this is more than technology. It is a symbol. It says that Burkina Faso is no longer waiting passively. It is building, testing, improving, and preparing its own future. The same spirit can be seen in Burkina Faso's work with drones. The country is not only thinking about fixed surveillance towers, it is also trying to adapt aerial tools to its own security needs. According to the original description, local engineers have designed and produced drone support devices inside the country. These devices are meant to help national defense forces use available equipment more effectively during security operations. Several versions were mentioned, from a simple model designed for one payload to more advanced models that can carry several. A newer rotating design was also described as part of the continuing innovation process. For this video, the important lesson is not the technical detail. The important lesson is the direction. Burkina Faso is moving from being only a buyer to becoming a builder. That is a major mental shift. When a country only buys imported systems, it must wait for permission, delivery, spare parts, foreign technicians, and foreign prices. But when its own engineers understand how to design and repair equipment, the country gains freedom. It can adapt quickly. It can improve a device after real experience in the field. It can teach younger engineers. It can build knowledge that stays inside the nation. This is the kind of defense thinking that Captain Ibrahim Traore appears to be encouraging. He is not simply asking, what can Burkina Faso purchase? He is asking, what can Burkina Faso produce with its own hands and its own intelligence? That question matters for all of Africa, because the future of security will not belong only to the countries with the biggest budgets. It will also belong to the countries that know how to think, innovate, repair, and adapt faster than the threats around them. Not everyone is convinced that Burkina Faso can succeed on this path. Critics, especially in parts of the Western media and policy community, often argue that the country lacks the financial resources, industrial base, and advanced electronics sector needed to build a sustainable defense technology industry. They point out that demonstrating a prototype is very different from deploying thousands of reliable systems across an entire nation. These concerns deserve to be taken seriously. Building a modern defense industry requires years of investment, skilled engineers, reliable supply chains, and continuous research. No country develops these capabilities overnight. However, there is another side to this discussion. History shows that many of today's leading industrial nations started with modest ambitions. Japan rebuilt its industries step by step after the Second World War. South Korea transformed itself over decades through education, manufacturing, and technological innovation. Even countries now recognized as technology leaders once depended heavily on foreign equipment before developing their own capabilities. Burkina Faso is not claiming to compete with global military powers today. Instead, It is taking the first steps toward solving its own security challenges with solutions designed by its own people. That distinction is important. Success should not be measured only by how sophisticated a device appears today. It should also be measured by whether a country is creating engineers, laboratories, local manufacturers, and a culture of innovation that can continue improving year after year. Perhaps the greatest achievement is not the surveillance tower itself. It is the confidence growing behind it. Every locally designed project gives young Burkinabe engineers another reason to believe that they can contribute to their country's future, rather than waiting for solutions to arrive from abroad. In that sense, the debate is no longer only about technology. It is about confidence, independence, and the determination to build instead of simply buying. If these projects continue to grow, the lasting legacy of Captain Ibrahim Traore may not be measured by a single surveillance tower or a locally developed drone component. His greatest impact could be the change in mindset that he is trying to inspire across Burkina Faso. For decades, many African countries were taught that advanced technology had to come from somewhere else. Young engineers often believed that the highest achievements would always be designed in foreign laboratories and imported at a high cost. That belief created a cycle of dependence that was difficult to break. Traore appears to be promoting a different vision. Instead of asking what Burkina Faso cannot afford, he encourages people to ask what Burkina Faso can create. This approach places education, engineering, innovation, and local talent at the center of national security. Whether every current project succeeds is almost secondary to the larger transformation taking place. Each prototype gives students a reason to study science. Each locally manufactured system encourages businesses to invest in technical skills. Each successful innovation builds confidence that future generations can solve even more complex challenges. This philosophy extends beyond military technology. It represents an effort to strengthen national resilience by developing knowledge that remains inside the country. Machines can wear out, but experience, engineering skills, and scientific thinking continue to grow as they are passed from one generation to the next. That may ultimately become Ibrahim Traore's most significant contribution. Not simply introducing new equipment, but encouraging an entire generation of Burkinabe citizens to believe that they can become creators rather than consumers of technology. If that confidence continues to spread, its influence may last far longer than any single piece of hardware ever could. Burkina Faso's experience also offers valuable lessons for many other African nations facing similar challenges. Every country has its own history, resources, and security concerns. But one principle applies almost everywhere. Long-term independence begins with developing local knowledge. For decades, many governments invested heavily in purchasing equipment, while investing far less in the engineers who would one day design, maintain, and improve that equipment. Burkina Faso is attempting to reverse that pattern by placing greater value on technical education, innovation, and domestic problem-solving. This does not mean that international cooperation should disappear. Modern technology is often built through partnerships, shared research, and global trade. The lesson is not to reject cooperation, but to participate in it from a position of growing capability rather than permanent dependence. If more African countries encourage young scientists, software developers, electronics specialists, and engineers to solve local problems, the continent could gradually build stronger technological foundations, surveillance systems, renewable energy solutions, communication networks, and emergency response technologies all represent opportunities where African innovation can make a meaningful difference. Of course, this transformation will require patience. Research takes time. Skilled professionals require years of education, Industries grow through repeated successes and occasional failures. Progress is rarely a straight line. Yet every successful prototype sends an important message. It tells young people that innovation is possible at home. It encourages investors to support local industries. It inspires universities to strengthen engineering programs. Most importantly, it reminds African societies that sustainable development is built not only through natural resources but also through human talent. The future of Africa may depend less on what it imports and more on what its own people are able to imagine, design, and create together. As we reach the end of this story, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The surveillance system developed in Burkina Faso is more than a piece of equipment. It represents a new way of thinking about national security, technological independence, and the future of African innovation. Whether these early projects eventually evolve into a large defense industry remains to be seen. There will undoubtedly be technical challenges, financial limitations, and difficult decisions ahead. But every nation that has ever built a successful industrial base began with a first step. Burkina Faso has now taken one of its own. Perhaps the most remarkable achievement is not that a locally designed surveillance system can monitor strategic areas using artificial intelligence and solar energy. It is that thousands of young Africans can now see proof that advanced technology does not have to remain the exclusive domain of wealthier nations. It can also emerge from determination, education, creativity, and confidence. For supporters of Pan-African cooperation, this story reflects the broader vision of Pan-Africanism strengthening Africa by investing in African talent. For Burkina Faso, the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traore has encouraged many citizens to believe that innovation can become part of national sovereignty. Whether discussed within the African Union or by observers following the rise of Africa New, the name Ibrahim Traore has become closely associated with debates about self-reliance and technological development. If you enjoyed this analysis and want to follow more stories about Africa's transformation, remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video. Your support helps us continue exploring the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of the continent. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video. Imagine seeing what appears to be a military armored vehicle rolling through the streets of Burkina Faso. At first glance, many people assumed it had come from a military factory, or perhaps from a foreign supplier. The vehicle's rugged appearance immediately captured attention and sparked curiosity. But the truth behind it was far more surprising than anyone expected. The man responsible was not a defense engineer. He was not backed by a major corporation, a government laboratory, or an international manufacturer. Instead, he was a local mechanic from Bobo Dioulasso, a man who spent years repairing vehicles and learning through experience rather than prestigious institutions. His name is Abdoua Ouedraogo. What makes this story remarkable is not simply the machine he built, it is the reason he decided to build it. According to his own testimony, the inspiration came after listening to speeches by Captain Ibrahim Traore. Those speeches convinced him that every citizen had a role to play in strengthening Burkina Faso. Rather than waiting for someone else to act, he decided to contribute in the only way he knew best, through hard work, creativity, and determination. The result was a project that would take an entire year of effort, countless challenges, and extraordinary perseverance. Yet the most important lesson is not about metal, engines, or machinery. It is about how a change in mindset can inspire ordinary people to attempt extraordinary things. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join us as we uncover how one mechanic's dream became a symbol of self-reliance, patriotism, and the growing confidence of a nation determined to shape its own future. Abdua Ouedraogo was not a celebrity, a politician, or a wealthy businessman. He was a mechanic who had spent more than 2 decades working with engines, metal parts, and damaged vehicles in Bobo Dioulasso, Burkina Faso's second-largest city. Like many skilled workers across Africa, he built his expertise through years of practical experience rather than through expensive schools or advanced engineering programs. His workshop was not filled with cutting-edge technology. It was a modest place where problems were solved through patience, creativity, and determination. Yet, it was in this environment that an idea began to take shape. An idea that many people would have considered impossible. Driven by a desire to contribute to his country, Abdua started working on a vehicle that resembled an armored military machine. He knew the project would be difficult. He lacked significant financial resources, access to specialized equipment, and the support of a large technical team. Most people in his position would have abandoned the idea before even beginning. Abdua chose a different path. Day after day, he continued building. Every component required time, effort, and problem-solving. Materials had to be found, adapted, and assembled with limited means. Progress was often slow, and each obstacle demanded another solution. According to his own account, the project eventually consumed nearly an entire year of his life. The most remarkable aspect of the story is not the vehicle itself, but the persistence behind it. Many people dream of doing something meaningful for their country. Far fewer are willing to dedicate months of hard work to transform those dreams into reality. By the time the project attracted public attention, it had become more than a machine. It had become a symbol of perseverance. It demonstrated that determination can sometimes compensate for a lack of resources, and that ordinary citizens can achieve extraordinary things when they refuse to give up on an idea they believe in. According to Abdua Ouedraogo, the turning point came when he listened carefully to speeches delivered by Captain Ibrahim Traore. While many people hear political speeches and move on with their daily lives, something in those messages affected him deeply. He began to think differently about his role as a citizen and about what contribution he could make to Burkina Faso during a difficult period in the nation's history. At the time, many soldiers and volunteers were risking their lives to defend communities against security threats, like millions of other citizens. Abdua followed the situation closely. He understood that there were people standing on the front lines, making sacrifices to protect their fellow countrymen. That realization stayed with him. In his own words, he felt that if others were giving their energy and courage to defend the country, then he also had a responsibility to contribute using the skills he possessed. He was not a soldier. He was not a government official. He was a mechanic. Therefore, he asked himself a simple but powerful question. How could a mechanic help his country? That question became the foundation of his project. What makes this story compelling is that it illustrates the power of inspiration when combined with action. Many people feel patriotic. Many people express support for their country. But inspiration only becomes meaningful when it motivates concrete action. For Abdua, that action took the form of a year-long effort to build something with his own hands. His journey also reveals an important truth. Transformational leadership is not measured only by policies or government programs. Sometimes its impact can be seen in the decisions ordinary citizens make after hearing a message that resonates with them. In this case, a mechanic decided that instead of waiting for change, he would become part of it. That decision transformed him from a spectator into a participant in Burkina Faso's future. At this point, it is important to clarify something that often gets lost in the excitement surrounding this story. The vehicle created by Abdua Ouedraogo is not a fully operational military armored vehicle. It is not a combat-ready machine, nor is it a finished defense product manufactured according to military specifications. Critics who focus only on the technical aspects often miss the larger point. If the conversation is limited to whether the vehicle meets military standards, then the most important lesson disappears entirely. The true significance of this project lies elsewhere. What makes the story powerful is the fact that a citizen decided to create rather than complain. Faced with limited resources and significant obstacles, Abdua chose action instead of passivity. He did not possess a large budget, advanced technology, or institutional support. Yet he refused to believe that these limitations meant he could contribute nothing. In many developing nations, people often become accustomed to waiting. They wait for governments, foreign investors, international organizations, or outside experts to solve local problems. Over time, this mindset can create dependence and discourage initiative. The project undertaken by Abdua represents the opposite approach. It reflects a growing belief that individuals can begin building solutions with the resources available to them today. Even if those solutions are imperfect, they can inspire others to think differently. That is why this vehicle has become a symbol rather than merely a machine. It symbolizes self-reliance. It symbolizes determination. Most importantly, it symbolizes a shift in mentality that many supporters of Burkina Faso's current direction believe is spreading throughout the country. The world may see a homemade armored vehicle. Many citizens of Burkina Faso see something deeper. They see proof that creativity is not reserved for wealthy nations. They see evidence that innovation can emerge from a small workshop just as easily as it can from a sophisticated laboratory. And they see a reminder that meaningful change often begins with one person deciding to act. To understand why stories like this attract so much attention, we must look beyond the workshop and examine the broader ideas that inspired them. At the center of that discussion is Captain Ibrahim Traore and the message he has consistently promoted since coming to power. One of the themes most frequently associated with Traore is self-reliance. He has repeatedly encouraged citizens to believe in their own abilities, use local resources, and reduce dependence on outside solutions whenever possible. Whether people agree with all of his policies or not, there is little doubt that this message has resonated with many Burkinabe citizens. For decades, much of Africa has been viewed through a lens of dependency. The common narrative suggested that progress would come only through foreign expertise, foreign investment, or foreign intervention. Many young Africans grew up hearing that innovation happened elsewhere, and that their role was simply to catch up. Traore's supporters argue that this mindset must change. They believe development begins when citizens stop seeing themselves as passive recipients and start seeing themselves as active builders of their nation's future. The story of Abdua Ouedraogo fits directly into this narrative. He did not wait for permission. He did not wait for perfect conditions. Instead, he took the skills he already possessed and applied them to a project that he believed could contribute, even symbolically, to his country. This is why many people see his work as part of a larger transformation. The vehicle itself may never become a military product, yet the mindset behind it could have far greater consequences. When one mechanic begins creating, others may begin experimenting. When one citizen demonstrates initiative, others may feel encouraged to do the same. History shows that national development rarely begins with massive projects alone. It often begins when ordinary people start believing that they are capable of shaping events rather than simply reacting to them. That belief may be the most powerful product generated by Abdua's workshop. As stories like Abdua Ouedraogo's spread across social media and international news platforms, they inevitably attract criticism. Some observers particularly in Western media and policy circles, argue that Burkina Faso still faces serious challenges that cannot be solved through symbolic projects or inspiring narratives alone. Critics point out that the country continues to confront security threats, economic difficulties, and political controversies. Others argue that the government should focus on institutional reforms, democratic processes, and long-term stability rather than encouraging symbolic displays of patriotism. These concerns are part of an ongoing debate that extends far beyond a single homemade vehicle. However, there is another side to the discussion. Supporters of Burkina Faso's current direction do not claim that every problem has been solved. They do not argue that one mechanics project can transform an entire nation overnight. Instead, they see value in the message behind the story. For them, the significance lies in the fact that ordinary citizens are beginning to believe they have a role in shaping their country's future. They view this shift in mentality as a necessary foundation for any meaningful development. After all, no nation becomes stronger solely through government action. Progress also depends on the confidence, initiative, and participation of its people. It is therefore possible to acknowledge legitimate criticisms while also recognizing the positive symbolism represented by projects like Abdoua's. These two perspectives are not mutually exclusive. The real question is not whether the vehicle is perfect. The real question is whether stories like this encourage citizens to become more creative, more engaged, and more willing to contribute to their communities. If the answer is yes, then the project has already achieved something important. It has inspired a conversation about responsibility, innovation, and national development that extends far beyond the walls of a small workshop in Bobo Dioulasso. The story of Abdoua Ouedraogo offers a lesson that extends far beyond Burkina Faso. It reminds us that innovation does not always begin in universities, government offices, or multinational corporations. Sometimes it begins in a small workshop, in the mind of an ordinary citizen who decides that waiting is no longer enough. Across Africa, millions of people possess valuable skills, practical knowledge, and creative ideas. Farmers understand their land, mechanics understand machines, craftsmen understand materials, teachers understand their communities. When these individuals begin applying their talents to local challenges, they become a powerful force for national development. This is perhaps the most important message behind Abdoua's project. The future of Africa will not be built by leaders alone. It will also be built by citizens who choose action over passivity and responsibility over excuses. The vehicle he created may never appear on a battlefield. It may never enter mass production. Yet its symbolic impact is already significant because it has encouraged people to think differently about what is possible. In the end, the world may remember a homemade vehicle that looked like an armored machine. But many people in Burkina Faso will remember something else. They will remember a mechanic who believed he could contribute to his country and acted on that belief. For supporters of Pan-African ideals, this story reflects a larger vision for Burkina Faso and for Africa's future. It reflects the hope that Pan-Africanism, the African Union, and a new generation inspired by leaders such as Captain Ibrahim Traore can help shape an Africa new era defined by confidence, creativity, and self-reliance. Whether one fully agrees with Ibrahim Traore or not, stories like this demonstrate the power of inspiring citizens to believe in themselves. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts below, and join us for more stories about determination, innovation, and the people helping shape the future of Burkina Faso and the African continent. So,
for decades, a quiet question has followed many young people in Burkina Faso. After graduation, what comes next? For too long, The expected answer was simple: find a job, serve in office, work for a foreign company, or wait for a government position that may never come. But today, something different is happening. Inside technical universities, the sound of machines is beginning to replace the silence of theory alone. Students are no longer only memorizing formulas from a classroom board. They are touching concrete, testing materials, studying machines, and learning how real production works. That shift may seem small, but for a nation trying to regain control of its future, it is enormous. And this is why many people are asking a powerful question: is Captain Ibrahim Traore helping end the old era when Burkinabe youth were trained mainly to work for others? Stay with this channel, because stories like this show how Africa is changing from the inside, not through promises from outside powers, but through the hands and minds of its own people. The old education model in many African countries was not built to create owners. It was built to create employees. After the colonial period, many systems continued to prepare students for administrative jobs, clerical work, or service roles inside institutions already controlled by others. In Burkina Faso, this meant that many talented young people were trained to seek permission before creating value. They were told that success meant being hired, but a country cannot build real independence if its brightest minds are only taught to wait for employment. That is the system now being challenged. Many supporters of the current reforms believe that changing this mindset is just as important as building new roads or factories. A nation that depends entirely on others for employment can never fully control its own economic destiny. Real sovereignty begins when citizens have the knowledge and confidence to create opportunities themselves. This philosophy has become increasingly visible under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traore. His administration has repeatedly linked education to national development, arguing that universities should not exist simply to award degrees. Instead, they should produce engineers, technicians, innovators, and entrepreneurs capable of solving Burkina Faso's own challenges. Rather than measuring success by the number of graduates who find positions in foreign companies, the new vision encourages universities to ask a different question: how many graduates can create jobs instead of searching for one? This shift explains why technical education has received renewed attention. Institutions specializing in engineering, construction, agriculture, manufacturing, and industrial technology are becoming central to Burkina Faso's long-term development strategy. Practical training is no longer viewed as secondary to academic theory. It is becoming the foundation upon which future industries can be built. The objective is straightforward, but ambitious. If Burkina Faso hopes to process more of its own raw materials, manufacture more products locally, and strengthen domestic industries, it will need thousands of highly skilled professionals who understand production from the ground up. Supporters argue that this transformation begins inside classrooms, workshops, and laboratories. They see education not merely as preparation for employment, but as preparation for nation building itself. While it will take years to measure the full impact of these reforms, the direction is becoming increasingly clear. Universities are expected to become engines of economic independence rather than factories producing graduates who simply wait to be hired. However, policy statements alone do not explain why so many observers are paying attention to Burkina Faso's universities. The clearest evidence can be found inside the workshops themselves. At the Natsibona University Institute of Technology, first-year civil engineering students are not spending every hour inside lecture halls. Instead, they gather around concrete mixers, piles of sand and granite, laboratory presses, and material testing equipment. Under the supervision of their instructors, they learn how to measure aggregates, test concrete strength, analyze construction materials, and understand the standards that govern modern engineering. For these students, theory becomes something they can see, touch, and verify. Lessons about the curing time of concrete or the properties of building materials are no longer abstract concepts found only in textbooks. They become real experiences that prepare students for construction sites, factories, and industrial projects. University officials describe these practical workshops as the heart of industrial education. Without hands-on experience, they argue, it is impossible to produce engineers capable of meeting the country's development needs. Their vision extends beyond traditional teaching. The laboratories can also support research projects, technical services, and partnerships with businesses, creating stronger links between universities and the productive economy. Another important element is the creation of innovation spaces such as Unipod and multidisciplinary competency centers. These facilities are designed to help students, researchers, and young innovators transform ideas into practical solutions. Instead of encouraging graduates to wait for opportunities, these centers aim to help them create opportunities. This represents more than a change in teaching methods. It reflects a broader belief that universities should become places where industries are born, technologies are improved, and future entrepreneurs gain the confidence to build businesses capable of serving Burkina Faso's own economy. The impact of this new educational approach extends far beyond university campuses. If graduates leave school with practical skills, entrepreneurial thinking, and the confidence to innovate, they become potential employers rather than lifelong employees. One successful engineering company can hire dozens of workers. One manufacturing business can create supply chains that support hundreds of families. This is how education gradually transforms into economic development. Supporters of these reforms believe this is exactly the path Burkina Faso must follow. A country rich in natural resources should not depend indefinitely on exporting raw materials while importing finished products. It needs engineers who can design factories, technicians who can maintain industrial equipment, entrepreneurs who can launch construction firms, and innovators who can develop technologies adapted to local realities. In this vision, universities become strategic institutions for national development rather than isolated academic centers. Every laboratory, every workshop, and every innovation hub becomes an investment in future industries. Students are encouraged to identify problems within their own communities and develop practical solutions instead of waiting for foreign companies to introduce them. This philosophy also represents a cultural transformation. Success is no longer defined only by receiving a monthly salary from someone else. Increasingly, it is associated with creating value, generating employment, and strengthening the country's productive capacity. Of course, education alone cannot guarantee economic transformation. Graduates will still need access to financing, stable markets, modern infrastructure, and supportive public policies. Yet, without an education system capable of producing skilled innovators and entrepreneurs, those other investments would struggle to achieve lasting results. For many observers, this is why Burkina Faso's educational reforms deserve attention. They are not simply changing classrooms. They are attempting to reshape how an entire generation thinks about work, opportunity, and national development. Not everyone views this transformation through the same lens. Critics in some Western media and policy circles argue that Burkina Faso continues to face serious political, economic, and security challenges. They question whether educational reforms alone can produce lasting change while the country confronts armed violence, limited financial resources, and ongoing governance concerns. These are legitimate issues that cannot simply be ignored. A modern education system requires stable institutions, sustained investment, qualified instructors, and strong partnerships with the private sector. Even the most ambitious university reforms cannot immediately solve every structural problem facing a developing nation. Yet, supporters of the current direction offer an important counter-argument. They believe educational reform should be evaluated by its own objectives and outcomes, rather than being dismissed because of broader political debates. If universities produce graduates with stronger technical skills, greater entrepreneurial confidence, and the ability to establish successful local businesses, then those achievements carry real value, regardless of ideological disagreements. They also argue that many countries now considered industrial powers invested heavily in technical education long before achieving broad economic prosperity. Factories were built because skilled workers and engineers existed, not the other way around. From this perspective, strengthening universities is not the final destination, but one of the essential first steps toward national development. The road ahead remains challenging. Young entrepreneurs will still need access to affordable financing, reliable electricity, modern transportation networks, and markets where locally manufactured products can compete fairly. Without these complementary conditions, many promising ideas may never become successful enterprises. Even so, Burkina Faso's experience offers an important lesson for other African nations. Lasting development cannot depend solely on natural resources or foreign investment. It also depends on educating a generation capable of creating industries, solving local problems, and building prosperity from within. Perhaps the greatest lesson emerging from Burkina Faso today is that genuine transformation does not begin with grand speeches or expensive infrastructure alone. It begins with changing the way young people think about their future. When universities teach students that they can become innovators instead of spectators, builders instead of followers, and employers instead of employees, they plant the seeds of long-term national resilience. This vision resonates with a broader movement taking shape across the African continent. Increasingly, governments, educators, and young entrepreneurs are asking whether Africa's universities should continue producing graduates whose greatest ambition is to leave their countries, or whether they should become centers that generate ideas, technologies, and businesses capable of transforming local economies. For Burkina Faso, this educational shift is closely connected to a larger national vision associated with Captain Ibrahim Traore. Supporters see it as part of an effort to strengthen economic sovereignty by investing in the country's own human capital. Whether every objective is ultimately achieved remains to be seen. But the emphasis on practical education, innovation, and entrepreneurship represents a significant departure from older development models. The broader lesson for Africa is equally important. Natural resources alone cannot secure prosperity. Foreign investment alone cannot guarantee independence. Sustainable progress depends on citizens who possess the knowledge, technical skills, and determination to solve their own challenges and build their own industries. If that vision continues to grow, universities may become one of the strongest foundations of a new Africa, an Africa where Pan-African cooperation is strengthened through knowledge, where Burkina Faso contributes to an Africa new built on innovation, where Captain Ibrahim Traore's emphasis on self-reliance encourages debate across the African Union, and where the ideals of Pan-Africanism inspire future generations. Above all, the story of Ibrahim Traore's educational reforms reminds us that lasting national strength is built first in the classroom, then in the workshop, and finally in the hands of those willing to create the future themselves. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy thoughtful analysis on Africa's transformation and the ideas shaping its future, please subscribe to the channel and join us in the next discussion. As this journey comes to an end, one message stands above all the others. The true strength of a nation is not measured only by its natural resources or military capabilities. It is measured by the knowledge, creativity, and determination of its people. Every engineer who solves a local problem, every entrepreneur who opens a new business, and every young innovator who transforms an idea into a practical solution contributes to a stronger and more independent future. Burkina Faso's evolving approach to higher education reflects this belief. Instead of preparing graduates to spend their lives waiting for opportunities created elsewhere, universities are increasingly encouraging them to become the people who create those opportunities themselves. Whether this ambitious vision fully succeeds will depend on consistent investment, effective implementation, and the resilience of the country's young generation. Yet, the direction itself represents an important shift in thinking for many across Africa. This story offers more than a national example. It raises an important question for every country seeking long-term development. Should education simply prepare students for existing jobs, or should it empower them to build entirely new industries and transform their own economies? The answers to these questions will shape the future of the continent. If more universities embrace practical learning, innovation, and entrepreneurship, the next generation may become the driving force behind a more confident and self-reliant Africa. That vision reflects the aspirations associated with Pan-African cooperation, the determination of Burkina Faso to strengthen its productive capacity, and the wider conversation inspired by Captain Ibrahim Traore, the African Union, and the ideals of Pan-Africanism. Whether one agrees with every policy or not, Ibrahim Traore has helped bring renewed attention to the role of education in national development. Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis valuable, please subscribe to the channel. Share this video with others who care about Africa's future, and join us again for our next discussion.
What if one of Africa's poorest nations stopped waiting for foreign investors, international lenders, and multinational corporations to shape its future? What if ordinary citizens became the owners of the factories, farms, and industries that power their economy? That is exactly the experiment unfolding in Burkina Faso under Captain Ibrahim Traore. While many African countries continue to rely heavily on foreign capital to finance development, Burkina Faso is attempting something far more ambitious. Through a program known as popular shareholding, hundreds of thousands of citizens are being invited to become direct stakeholders in national economic projects. For decades, Africa has faced a painful contradiction. The continent possesses enormous natural wealth, yet many countries remain dependent on exporting raw materials while importing finished products at higher prices. Burkina Faso has not escaped this reality. The country produces agricultural goods, livestock, and gold. Yet much of the value generated from those resources has historically left the country. Traore's response is built around a simple but powerful question. If Burkina Faso has resources, workers, farmers, and entrepreneurs, why should it always wait for outsiders to finance its development? This question challenges one of the most common assumptions about economic growth in Africa. Rather than asking who will invest in Burkina Faso, the government is asking how Burkinabe citizens can invest in themselves. The goal is not only to raise money, it is to transform the role of citizens within the economy. Instead of remaining consumers, taxpayers, and workers, they are encouraged to become shareholders and co-owners of national development projects. If you enjoy exploring bold economic ideas that could reshape Africa's future, make sure to subscribe and join us for more stories like this. Popular shareholding did not appear out of nowhere. Although many international observers describe it as a new economic experiment, its roots reach deep into African traditions and Burkina Faso's own history. For generations, Communities across West Africa survived through collective effort. Families worked shared fields, cared for communal livestock, and contributed labor to projects that benefited everyone. Wealth was often understood not only as an individual achievement, but also as a collective responsibility. The success of one household strengthened the entire community. Supporters of popular shareholding argue that Ibrahim Traore is adapting this traditional spirit to the modern economy. Instead of asking villagers to work together on a communal farm, the model encourages citizens to pool financial resources and become shareholders in enterprises that serve national development goals. The intellectual foundation of this idea is also linked to long-standing debates about African economic independence. Thinkers such as Laurent Gbagbo promoted the concept of community entrepreneurship as a way to mobilize local resources rather than relying exclusively on external funding. Their argument was simple. A nation that cannot finance its own productive sectors will struggle to control its own future. Many observers also see echoes of the philosophy associated with Thomas Sankara. During the 1980s, Sankara emphasized self-reliance, local production, and dignity through work. While the economic tools are different today, the underlying message remains familiar. Development should begin with the people themselves. What makes Traore's approach unique is the attempt to transform a cultural value into a modern financial mechanism. Citizens are not simply encouraged to support development in theory. They are invited to participate directly through ownership. This distinction matters. A factory funded by community shareholders is viewed differently from one financed entirely by foreign investors. For supporters, it creates a stronger connection between economic growth and national responsibility. The project becomes more than a business venture. It becomes a symbol of collective ambition and shared destiny. At first glance, many people compare Ibrahim Traore's economic vision to the model that helped transform Norway into one of the wealthiest nations in the world. Both approaches begin with a similar principle. National resources should benefit the population rather than a small elite or foreign interests. Norway used revenues from its oil and gas sector to build a massive national wealth fund. The state collected and managed those resources on behalf of the population, creating long-term financial security for future generations. It is often presented as one of the most successful examples of resource management in modern history. Burkina Faso shares the same desire for economic sovereignty, but Traore is attempting something fundamentally different. Instead of relying primarily on the state to manage wealth for citizens, he is encouraging citizens to become direct participants in the creation of that wealth. This distinction may seem subtle, but it changes the entire relationship between people and the economy. In the traditional model, citizens benefit indirectly through public services, infrastructure, and government spending. In the Burkinabe model, citizens are invited to become shareholders in projects that seek to generate economic value. Supporters argue that this approach goes beyond ownership on paper. It creates a sense of responsibility and engagement. When people own a stake in a factory, an agricultural project, or a mining enterprise, they may feel a stronger interest in its success. Traore's innovation lies in combining modern investment mechanisms with a community-centered culture. Rather than copying a European model, he has adapted the principle of shared prosperity to local realities. The goal is not merely to distribute wealth after it is created. The goal is to involve citizens in creating that wealth from the beginning. For this reason, many observers believe Burkina Faso is not building a version of Norway. It is attempting to create something uniquely African, shaped by its own history, traditions, and development challenges. Turning an idea into reality required more than speeches and patriotic slogans. To make popular shareholding work, Burkina Faso needed an institution capable of organizing investments, managing subscriptions, and connecting citizens to national development projects. That institution became the Agency for the Promotion of Community Entrepreneurship, widely known as APEC. Created in 2023, APEC was designed to provide the legal and operational framework for community-owned enterprises. Its mission is straightforward but ambitious. It seeks to mobilize domestic savings, identify productive projects, and channel citizen investments into sectors considered essential for national development. One of the most remarkable aspects of the program is its accessibility. Participation is not reserved for wealthy investors or large corporations. Farmers, workers, retirees, small business owners, students, and members of the diaspora can all become shareholders. This broad participation is central to the philosophy behind the initiative. Economic transformation should involve the population as a whole, rather than a limited group of elites. The response has been significant. Hundreds of thousands of Burkinabe citizens have joined the program, while billions of CFA francs have been mobilized to support community enterprises. These figures suggest that many people are willing to contribute financially when they believe they have a direct stake in the outcome. The participation of the diaspora has also played an important role. Burkinabe citizens living abroad are encouraged to invest in projects from their countries of residence, allowing them to contribute to development without returning home permanently. For supporters, the success of APEC is measured by more than the money collected. It represents a shift in mentality. Citizens are no longer viewed simply as beneficiaries of development programs. They are becoming partners in the process. Whether this model ultimately succeeds or fails, it has already changed the conversation about who should finance the future of Burkina Faso. The true test of any economic vision is not the number of speeches delivered or the amount of money collected. The real test is whether tangible results appear on the ground. In Burkina Faso, supporters of popular shareholding point to a growing list of projects that aim to prove the model can move from theory to reality. One of the most visible examples is the development of tomato processing facilities. For years, Burkina Faso produced large quantities of tomatoes, yet the country still depended heavily on imported tomato products. This situation reflected a broader challenge faced by many African economies. Raw materials were produced locally, but much of the value-added processing occurred elsewhere. The new factories seek to change that equation. Instead of exporting agricultural products in their raw form, Burkina Faso aims to process more of them domestically. Supporters believe this approach can create jobs, strengthen local industries, and reduce dependence on imported goods. Agriculture is not the only target. The broader program also includes agricultural mechanization initiatives, centralized purchasing systems for agricultural products, and semi-mechanized mining projects. Each project is designed around the same principle. Resources generated within the country should contribute more directly to national prosperity. The expected benefits extend beyond production figures. New industries can create employment opportunities for young people, provide more stable markets for farmers, and encourage additional investment in local supply chains. Instead of exporting value, the country seeks to retain more of it within its borders. For many citizens, these projects represent something larger than economic development. They symbolize the possibility of transforming Burkina Faso from a supplier of raw materials into a producer of finished goods. Whether that transformation succeeds remains to be seen. But the ambition behind it is undeniable. It is an attempt to build industrial growth with the participation of the people themselves. Not everyone is convinced that popular shareholding will deliver the results its supporters expect. As the program gains attention, it has also attracted criticism from international observers, economists, and commentators who question whether such an ambitious experiment can succeed over the long term. One concern involves governance. Critics argue that collecting money from hundreds of thousands of citizens is only the beginning. The greater challenge is ensuring that projects are managed efficiently, transparently, and profitably. Without strong oversight, public trust could be damaged. Others point to financial risk. Any investment carries uncertainty, and not every factory, agricultural enterprise, or mining project will automatically become successful. Some observers worry that ordinary citizens could face disappointment if certain projects fail to meet expectations. Supporters of the initiative respond that risk exists in every development strategy. They argue that dependence on foreign loans, external aid, and imported products also carries significant risks. From this perspective, popular shareholding is not risk-free, but neither is the status quo. Another criticism is that community-owned enterprises may struggle to compete against large international corporations. Yet supporters note that many successful industrial nations protected and supported domestic industries during their early stages of development. Ultimately, the debate reflects two different visions of economic progress. One emphasizes integration into existing global financial structures. The other seeks to build stronger domestic ownership and control over productive sectors. Whether popular shareholding becomes a historic success or an important lesson remains uncertain. What is clear is that Burkina Faso has opened a conversation that extends far beyond its borders. The question is no longer whether Africans can participate in development. The question is whether they can become owners of it. Whether popular shareholding ultimately succeeds or fails will only be known years from now. Economic transformation is never measured in months. It is measured in generations. Yet even at this early stage, the experiment taking place in Burkina Faso has already captured attention across Africa because it challenges assumptions that many people considered unquestionable for decades. Development discussions often focused on attracting foreign investment, securing international loans, and obtaining external assistance. Ibrahim Traore has not rejected cooperation with the outside world, but he has placed a different question at the center of the conversation. What happens when citizens themselves become investors in national development? That question may prove to be the most important aspect of this entire project. Factories can be built, programs can change, governments can come and go, but a population that begins to see itself as an owner rather than a spectator may develop a completely different relationship with the economy. The broader lesson for Africa is not that every country should copy Burkina Faso's model exactly. Each nation has its own history, institutions, and challenges. The lesson is that development becomes more powerful when people feel personally connected to it. Citizens are more likely to support economic transformation when they believe they share both the responsibility and the rewards. Captain Ibrahim Traore is attempting to turn that idea into reality by linking ownership, participation, and industrial development. He is testing a model that many countries have discussed, but few have attempted on such a scale. History will determine whether this vision fulfills its promise. Yet, one fact is already clear. Burkina Faso has launched one of the most closely watched economic experiments in modern Africa. For supporters of Pan-African development, Africa New Thinking, Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore, the African Union, Pan-Africanism, and Ibrahim Traore's vision of economic sovereignty. The outcome could influence debates across the continent for years to come. If you enjoyed this analysis, subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Your perspective may be part of the conversation shaping Africa's future. Have you ever wondered why a valley once used by extremist groups is now becoming one of the places they fear the most. Recently, Burkina Faso's BIR-23 launched a decisive operation against a JNIM position in Bangasso, a locality within the Sauru Valley. After several days of surveillance and intelligence gathering, the unit moved into action. When the operation ended, the militant base had been destroyed and valuable equipment had been seized. At first glance, this may appear to be another successful counterterrorism mission. However, the events in Bangasso may represent something much larger. They reflect changing military tactics in Burkina Faso, the growing influence of African-led security strategies, and a broader effort by the Alliance of Sahel states to strengthen regional self-reliance. If you are interested in understanding the forces reshaping West Africa today, be sure to follow the channel and stay with us until the end. To understand the importance of this operation, we must first look at the Sauru Valley itself. For years, the region has held strategic value because of its location and its role as a movement corridor for armed groups. Control of this area can influence security across surrounding communities. What makes the Bangasso operation stand out is not only the outcome, but also the preparation behind it. BIR-23 reportedly spent days monitoring the target, gathering information, and studying enemy activity before launching its assault. This detail reveals an important lesson. Modern military success is often built on patience, intelligence, and careful planning. In Bangasso, information became a weapon, and preparation laid the foundation for victory. The destruction of the Bangasso base was more than a tactical success. It represented a direct challenge to JNIM's ability to operate freely inside the Sauru Valley. According to reports from the operation, BIR-23 not only eliminated the position, but also recovered weapons, satellite communication equipment, and mobility assets used by the militants. Each of these items plays an important role in sustaining insurgent activity. Weapons provide combat capability. Communication devices allow coordination across remote areas. Vehicles make it possible to move fighters, supplies, and information quickly across difficult terrain. When a group loses these resources, the impact goes far beyond a single battlefield encounter. Replacing trained fighters may be difficult, but rebuilding a disrupted support network can be even harder. Logistics, communications, and mobility are the foundations that allow insurgent organizations to survive over long periods. This is why the Bangasso operation carries strategic significance. The loss of a base means the loss of a safe location for planning, regrouping, and storing resources. It forces militants to spend time and energy rebuilding instead of expanding their activities. The psychological effect is equally important. Areas once viewed as secure can suddenly become vulnerable when intelligence-driven operations begin targeting hidden positions. For JNIM, that creates uncertainty. Fighters can no longer assume that remote locations automatically provide protection. For local communities, the message is very different. Operations like this demonstrate that state security forces are willing and able to pursue threats beyond major towns and into areas that have long experienced instability. The battle in Bangasso was therefore not only about what was destroyed, it was about changing the balance of confidence. JNIM lost a place it depended on, while Burkina Faso gained another example of its growing ability to challenge extremist networks in one of the most contested parts of the country. What makes BIR-23 stand out is not simply its ability to win battles. Many military units can achieve success under favorable conditions. What separates elite formations from ordinary ones is their ability to produce results consistently in difficult environments. The Bangasso operation highlights several characteristics that have helped BIR-23 build a growing reputation across Burkina Faso. First is discipline. Rather than rushing toward a target, the unit appears to prioritize observation, preparation, and timing. This reduces unnecessary risks and increases the chances of success once an operation begins. Second is the emphasis on intelligence. Modern conflicts are often won by those who understand the battlefield better than their opponents. Knowing where a group is located, how it communicates, when it moves, and where it stores equipment can be more valuable than overwhelming firepower. BIR-23 has increasingly demonstrated the importance of information-driven operations. Third is initiative. In many conflicts, security forces spend most of their time reacting to attacks. BIR-23 represents a different approach. Instead of waiting for threats to emerge, it seeks to identify and disrupt them before they can act. This shift from reaction to prevention can significantly change the security environment over time. These qualities have helped transform the unit into more than a military formation. For many citizens, it has become a symbol of determination and national resilience. Each successful mission reinforces the belief that difficult areas can be stabilized and that extremist groups are not invincible. Perhaps the most important lesson is that effective military power is not measured only by weapons or numbers. It is measured by preparation, adaptability, and the ability to make sound decisions under pressure. In that sense, BIR-23 represents a broader transformation taking place within Burkina Faso's security strategy. To understand why operations such as Bangasso continue to attract attention across West Africa, it is important to look beyond the battlefield and examine the broader security philosophy that has emerged under Ibrahim Traore's leadership. One of the most significant shifts has been the move away from a purely defensive posture. For many years, security forces in the region were often forced to respond after attacks had already occurred. Armed groups would strike villages, disrupt transportation routes, or target military positions before disappearing into difficult terrain. This created a cycle in which the initiative frequently remained with the insurgents. The approach increasingly associated with Burkina Faso today seeks to reverse that dynamic. Rather than waiting for threats to appear, security forces aim to identify hostile networks, monitor their movements, and disrupt their operations before attacks can be launched. The Bangasso operation reflects this principle. Days of surveillance were followed by a carefully timed intervention designed to remove a threat before it could strengthen its position. This shift also reflects a broader emphasis on regaining control of territory. Security is not measured only by the absence of attacks. It is also measured by whether citizens can travel safely, cultivate farmland, conduct business, and maintain normal daily life. Every area restored to greater stability represents progress toward that objective. Equally important is the psychological dimension. Successful operations help strengthen public confidence in state institutions. When communities repeatedly witness security forces taking initiative and producing results, trust can begin to replace fear. That confidence becomes an important asset in its own right because local populations are often essential sources of information and cooperation. For this reason, the significance of Bangasso extends beyond the immediate outcome. The operation serves as an example of how a new security mindset is being translated into action on the ground, combining intelligence, preparation, and persistence in pursuit of longer-term stability. While Ibrahim Traore is often the most visible figure associated with Burkina Faso's security transformation, the developments taking place today extend beyond any single leader. They are increasingly connected to the broader vision emerging within the Alliance of Sahel States, commonly known as AES. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger face many of the same challenges. Armed groups move across borders, exploit remote terrain, and take advantage of gaps in regional coordination. Because these threats do not stop at national boundaries, the response cannot remain limited to individual countries acting alone. This reality has encouraged deeper cooperation among AES members. Intelligence sharing, military coordination, training initiatives, and joint security planning have become important components of the alliance's strategy. The objective is not simply to react to isolated incidents, but to create a more integrated approach to regional security. The Bangasso operation can be viewed through this wider lens. While the action itself occurred within Burkina Faso, its significance reaches beyond a single location. Every successful operation that weakens extremist networks contributes to the overall security environment of neighboring countries as well. For supporters of the AES project, this represents an important shift. Instead of relying primarily on external actors to define security priorities, member states are increasingly seeking to build solutions based on their own assessment of local realities. Whether one fully agrees with every aspect of this approach or not, it reflects a growing determination to develop regional capabilities from within. In that sense, Bangasso is more than a battlefield success. It is another example of how Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are attempting to transform shared security challenges into opportunities for deeper cooperation and greater self-reliance across the Sahel region. As Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger pursue a more independent security strategy, their approach continues to generate debate beyond the region. Some Western governments, analysts, and organizations have expressed concerns about governance, military influence in politics, and the long-term implications of the changes taking place across the Sahel. Critics argue that security operations alone cannot solve every challenge facing the region. They point to issues such as economic development, political reform, and human rights as factors that must also be addressed. These concerns remain part of the broader international discussion surrounding the future of the Sahel. At the same time, many citizens within the region view the situation through a different lens. For communities that have endured years of violence, displacement, and insecurity, the immediate question is often whether daily life is becoming safer. From this perspective, successful operations against armed groups carry significant weight because they directly affect the ability of families to work, travel, and live without fear. The reality is that both security and long-term development matter. Stability creates conditions for progress, while lasting progress helps reinforce stability. The challenge for Burkina Faso and its partners is to strengthen both at the same time. The operation in Bangasso illustrates why this debate continues. Supporters see evidence of growing capability and determination. Critics urge caution and broader reforms. Between these perspectives lies an important truth. Nations are ultimately judged not only by promises or criticism, but by the conditions experienced by their people on the ground. The operation in Bangasso will likely be remembered for more than the destruction of a single militant base. It represents a broader story unfolding across the Sahel, one that combines military adaptation, regional cooperation, and a growing belief in self-reliance. For Burkina Faso, the mission demonstrated the effectiveness of intelligence-driven operations. BIR-23 showed that patience, preparation, and precise execution can produce meaningful results against determined adversaries. The success also reinforced the unit's growing reputation as one of the most capable military formations in the region. At a deeper level, the operation reflected the security philosophy that has become increasingly associated with Ibrahim Traore's leadership. The emphasis on initiative rather than reaction, on reclaiming territory rather than merely defending it, and on strengthening local capabilities rather than relying exclusively on external solutions continues to shape the country's approach. The significance extends beyond Burkina Faso. Through the alliance of Sahel states, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are attempting to create a framework in which neighboring countries cooperate more closely to confront common threats. Whether this model ultimately achieves all of its goals remains to be seen, but its influence on regional discussions is already clear. Perhaps the most important lesson from Bangasso is that lasting change often begins with a series of determined actions. A single operation cannot solve every challenge facing the Sahel, yet each successful step can help create momentum, restore confidence, and open new possibilities for the future. For many supporters of Pan-African ideals, the events in Burkina Faso symbolize something larger than military success. They reflect an Africa new vision of responsibility, capability, and self-determination. Discussions about Pan-Africanism, the African Union, Captain Ibrahim Traore. And Ibrahim Traore himself continue to generate strong opinions. But they also highlight a growing conversation about how African nations can shape their own future. As Burkina Faso moves forward, many across the continent will be watching closely. If you found this analysis valuable, share your thoughts below and subscribe to the channel for more insights into the changing landscape of Africa and the Sahel. Just a few years ago, Burkina Faso was being described as one of the most dangerous places on Earth. International reports ranked it among the countries hardest hit by terrorism. Entire communities lived under constant fear. Armed groups expanded their influence across large parts of the country, and many analysts warned that the nation was moving toward collapse. At the time, headlines focused on growing insecurity, mass displacement, and the steady erosion of state authority. Millions of people were affected by the crisis. Schools closed their doors. Health centers stopped functioning. Families abandoned their homes, uncertain if they would ever return. For many observers, Burkina Faso appeared trapped in a downward spiral with no clear way out. What makes this story remarkable is what happened next. By 2025, international assessments began reporting something few expected. Burkina Faso recorded the largest reduction in terrorism-related deaths anywhere in the world. The same country that had become a symbol of insecurity was now being cited as an example of significant improvement in the fight against violent extremism. How did this happen? What changed inside a nation that many believed was already losing the battle? And why have the results forced even some of its harshest critics to pay attention? In this video, we will explore the crisis that pushed Burkina Faso to the edge, the leadership decisions that reshaped its security strategy, and the transformation that has turned one of the world's most troubled countries into a nation determined to reclaim its future. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy stories about Africa's transformation and the leaders reshaping its future. To understand the scale of this turnaround, we first need to return to the darkest years of Burkina Faso's crisis. Between 2019 and 2022, terrorist violence escalated dramatically. Large areas of the country became difficult to govern. Armed groups linked to regional extremist networks launched repeated attacks on villages, military positions, and transportation routes. Fear spread rapidly across the nation, and many international observers believed Burkina Faso was losing control of its own territory. When people discuss Burkina Faso's transformation, one name inevitably stands at the center of the conversation: Captain Ibrahim Traore. When he took power in 2022, many outside observers were skeptical. He was young, relatively unknown on the international stage, and inheriting a country facing one of the worst security crises in the world. Terrorist attacks were increasing, public confidence was falling, and large portions of the population had been displaced from their homes. For critics, the outlook seemed bleak. Many predicted that Burkina Faso would continue down the same path of instability that had already consumed so much of the Sahel region. But Traore chose a different approach. Rather than focusing primarily on international approval, he placed security at the center of his agenda. His message was straightforward. Burkina Faso could not depend entirely on outside powers to solve its problems. The country would need to strengthen its own institutions, rebuild its military capacity, and restore control over its territory through national effort. This philosophy became the foundation of a broader strategy built around sovereignty, self-reliance, and national mobilization. Supporters viewed this approach as a necessary response to years of worsening insecurity. They argued that previous methods had failed to stop the expansion of terrorist groups and that a new direction was needed. One of Traore's most important decisions was to treat the security crisis as a national challenge rather than a problem for the military alone. The government increased recruitment efforts, expanded local defense initiatives, and encouraged greater participation from communities affected by violence. At the same time, Burkina Faso began diversifying its international partnerships. Instead of relying on a single group of foreign partners, the country explored relationships with a wider range of nations willing to provide military, economic, and technical cooperation. Whether one agrees with all of Traore's policies or not, there is little doubt that his leadership marked a turning point. While many expected Burkina Faso to continue losing ground, the country began pursuing a strategy designed not merely to survive, but to reverse the trajectory of the conflict itself. The real test, however, would come on the battlefield, where strategy would have to be matched by results. If leadership provided the vision, military reform provided the mechanism that turned vision into action. One of the first priorities of Burkina Faso's new security strategy was rebuilding the country's ability to fight back. For years, terrorist groups had exploited vast distances, weak infrastructure, and limited military presence across large sections of the country. Security forces were often forced into a reactive posture, responding after attacks had already occurred. The new approach sought to change that reality. Recruitment efforts were expanded, bringing more personnel into the armed forces at a time when the security threat remained severe. Alongside the regular military, the government increased support for community-based defense initiatives and volunteer forces that could help improve local security and provide valuable intelligence. The goal was not simply to increase numbers. The objective was to create a broader national security network capable of responding more quickly to threats and maintaining a stronger presence in vulnerable regions. At the operational level, the military gradually shifted from defense to offense. Instead of focusing exclusively on protecting positions after attacks occurred, security forces launched more proactive operations aimed at disrupting extremist networks before they could strike. This strategy focused heavily on mobility, intelligence gathering, and territorial recovery. Areas that had long been considered difficult to secure became priorities for military operations. Supply routes received greater attention, while efforts were made to reconnect isolated communities with government services. The psychological impact was also significant. For years, terrorist organizations had benefited from the perception that they could move freely and operate without serious resistance. As military operations intensified, the message began to change. The state was no longer retreating. It was actively contesting territory and attempting to restore its authority. Success did not come overnight. The conflict remained complex, and serious security challenges persisted. However, the shift in strategy started producing visible changes on the ground. More communities began seeing a stronger security presence, and confidence gradually improved in areas where state authority had previously weakened. This military transformation laid the foundation for the next phase of Burkina Faso's security strategy, one that combined domestic reforms with new international partnerships and modern military capabilities. As Burkina Faso expanded its military operations, another important change was taking place behind the scenes. The country was working to modernize the tools available to its armed forces. For years, one of the biggest challenges facing security forces across the Sahel was mobility. Terrorist groups often operated across vast and difficult terrain, moving quickly between remote areas and exploiting gaps in security coverage. Fighting such networks required more than determination. It required modern equipment capable of supporting rapid and effective operations. This is where Burkina Faso's growing defense partnerships became increasingly important. Among the systems attracting international attention were Chinese-made armored vehicles, advanced mortar platforms, and modern rocket systems. These acquisitions represented a significant upgrade in capability compared with much of the equipment previously available to the armed forces. The VN-22B armored vehicle offered improved protection and mobility for troops operating in high-risk areas, in regions where ambushes and roadside attacks had become common. Better protection could mean the difference between success and failure during an operation. The PLL-05 self-propelled mortar system provided greater flexibility and fire support. Its combination of mobility and precision made it suitable for responding quickly to threats while supporting troops engaged in difficult terrain. Meanwhile, the SR-5 rocket system brought longer-range strike capabilities that could be used against larger concentrations of hostile forces. Such systems gave commanders additional options when planning operations across wide geographic areas. However, it is important to understand what these weapons did and did not accomplish. Military equipment alone does not defeat terrorism. No armored vehicle, rocket launcher, or artillery system can solve underlying security challenges by itself. Success depends on leadership, training, intelligence, logistics, coordination, and the ability to maintain control over recovered territory. What the new equipment provided was an important advantage. It strengthened the military's ability to implement its broader strategy and increased its capacity to respond to evolving threats. Combined with expanded recruitment, territorial operations, and regional cooperation, modernization became another piece of the larger effort to reverse years of insecurity, and gradually, measurable results began to emerge. For any government, military operations are ultimately judged by results. Strategies, speeches, and equipment matter. But the real question is simple. Did conditions improve on the ground? By 2025, a growing number of observers were forced to acknowledge that something significant was happening in Burkina Faso. International assessments reported that the country experienced the largest reduction in terrorism-related deaths anywhere in the world during that year. This was especially remarkable because Burkina Faso had previously been considered one of the global epicenters of terrorist violence. The numbers alone attracted attention, but statistics tell only part of the story. Behind those figures were communities that had spent years living under constant fear. In several areas, residents began returning to places they had previously been forced to abandon. Families that had fled violence started rebuilding their lives. Economic activity slowly resumed in locations where insecurity had disrupted daily life for years. The return of civilians is often one of the clearest indicators that security conditions are changing. People rarely return home because of political speeches. They return when they believe the risks have become lower, and the future appears more stable than the past. There were also signs of progress in territorial control. Security forces increased their presence in areas that had once been considered highly vulnerable. Transportation routes became easier to secure, and local authorities gradually expanded their ability to provide services in some previously isolated communities. None of this meant that Burkina Faso had solved every problem. The country continued to face serious security threats, humanitarian challenges, and economic pressures. Extremist groups remained active in parts of the region, and the situation was still far from perfect. Yet the broader trend was difficult to ignore. Only a few years earlier, many analysts were asking whether Burkina Faso could survive its security crisis. By 2025, the conversation had changed dramatically. The focus was no longer on imminent collapse. Instead, attention shifted toward understanding how such a significant improvement had been achieved. The country's experience was becoming one of the most closely watched security stories anywhere in Africa, and perhaps in the world. As Burkina Faso's security situation began to improve, a debate emerged that extended far beyond the country's borders. For years, many Western governments, media organizations, and policy experts had expressed concerns about the direction taken by Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traore. Critics questioned the country's political trajectory, warned about the risks associated with military-led governance, and raised concerns about human rights, democratic institutions, and international partnerships. Some observers argued that distancing the country from traditional Western security frameworks would weaken its ability to combat terrorism. Others predicted that new alliances and alternative security strategies would fail to produce meaningful results.